Good. Well, good day.
Hello, Bob. I have a historical hat on.
Oh, good.
I had to come up with something to entice the viewers.
Well, just before we get too far in, to any of the listeners that are out there, they do hear tapping and pounding. It's on my end. We're getting our roof on our townhomes redone, so unfortunately we can't stop the work for half an hour. But if you hear
Okay.
anything, don't feel it's your side. It's mine.
Okay. That means people are employed, which is a good sign.
Yeah, I guess there is.
I mean, after all, we're coming up to the Labor Day weekend, the
Yes.
last days of summer, and it's all about uh, honoring the working class, get a weekend off.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess just kind of as a segue from our last week's show, I'd mentioned in pre-production that I'd been thinking about it, and it goes back to that old 50s and 60s shows when the police were always talking about John Q. Public. And I never really thought too much about John Q. Public. It was just kind of a statement. You know, who is John Q. Public? What is John Q. Public? But after our discussions last week, I was wondering, is that Q? No one could ever tell me what it meant or what it was about. But I'm wondering if it means that John Q. Public is actually John questioning public now, asking questions that maybe people in power don't want to hear or don't want to answer, or is there hope? I guess is the thrust that maybe there are a few adults in the room that are starting to stand up.
Well, this is interesting way to start the show, Bob, because we are at the end. We've had a summer of all sorts of very strange things happening, revelations of various sorts, be that the declining economy or this, social issues of the war in Ukraine. It's been a eventful summer, and a lot of the stuff that was pronounced by the powers that be through the legacy media is being questioned today. I don't think they're getting the free ride that they used to have before.
Mhm.
And you're right. There is something happening. I don't. Hard to put your finger on it.
No, no. I guess it goes back to well, the old fairy tales, parables, maybe. You know, the emperor's new clothes, and they could get away with all kinds of stuff. He could wander around naked all he wants, and nobody would say anything. But now people are starting to think, and perhaps this isn't right, and maybe somebody should tell him and her, whatever it happens to be, and maybe this is, I don't know, is it a renaissance?
Well, that's a very optimistic way to look at what going forward. That maybe there is a renaissance. You have either a renaissance or we could going into the dark ages. So there's kind of a
Fine point.
juxtaposition there.
It's like sanity, right? That fine point between, are you sane or are you insane? Or
Well, I was watching a program, um, uh, which is on Rumble. It's Megan Kelly, who used to be with Fox News, and
Mhm.
she was ingloriously kicked off that platform some years ago, but has become very successful on social media and Sirius XM with their own show, and there are plenty of others as well. But in her case, she pointed out in a show she did a couple of days ago that cue that you're referring to is probably because there's a thing called the internet, that the people who are in legacy media and have been bought off by the various political and corporate interests, who have seen the internet, the growth of the internet and social media, kind of poo-pooed. Said, nah, it's just a passing phase, like, CB radio or something. And I think it's coming to bite them in the backside, because, when you look at the changes that have taken place in the media landscape, and that is where, just in the U.S., when they had the debates on Fox with the Republican candidates last week or the week before, they had something like 12 million viewers. They thought that was a big deal. At the same time, Tucker Carlson, who also is a refugee from that legacy media crowd, had over 111 million views talking to, Donald Trump for 45 minutes. These are phenomenal numbers. You can't say, there's no impact of social. You and I are here, having this conversation. No one's gonna, the ABC or CNN or Fox wouldn't ask us for our opinions, but we have opinions, and and whether it's 50 people are watching or 5,000 people watch it, we are uh, able to, for the moment
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
express our view and question stuff. So the Q part of the public that's exactly right. We're saying, everything that you're telling us is not necessarily so. And maybe
Mhm.
we'd like to have some answers to questions we have, and
Mhm.
not just be given,
Big old bread.
yeah, that's right. It's exactly right. So
But again, I guess that also kind of ties in, particularly here in Canada, with our illustrious um, leadership, and I use that term very loosely.
yes.
Uh, Whining and crying now that Meta isn't putting its news from Canada on its website anymore because they enacted a bill that wanted them to pay for that series. And I understand that there are people out there that are not computer literate, but if you're going to a particular site for your news and information, are you not really actually part of the problem? Like, don't you know how to use bookmarks? Can't you find a CNN.com, a CTV.ca, bookmark them so you can always come back to them? You don't have to rely on one platform to get your information. And why this band of, I don't know, what do you, band of something or others are standing up now and decrying this thing called Meta for not putting on news about fires that people in Canada need to know about. Well, uh, you can't have your cake and eat it too sometimes, and this is just the case. You started the process, you've enacted a bill, and this is part of the results and consequences of that, where you're really not thinking things through. You just do something because it sounds good, or it would be for 1% of the population. It might fit a niche, and I might be off base here. I don't know, but
Well, I think they underestimated the creature known as the internet. They overestimate the influence of influencers as well, which they think can be segued into social media, and then it has more of an impact than they believe. In other words, when you look at some of the fringe stuff that's on the internet, I think the vast majority of people see it as fringe stuff, and they may get a good chuckle out of it. They might be a little voyeuristic about some of the stuff, but in fact, they know it's fringe. So one of the things that social media does is it shows up in the likes and the subscriber column, much more revealing in those terms, especially if it's a short-term explosion of interest and then all of a sudden it drops off. That's like top 40 radio used to be. That, you know, a number one song, it was number one with a bullet, went to the top, and after a while people got sick of hearing it, and that was it. Okay. And so a lot of the really crazy weird stuff on the internet, that's how I see it. But when you look at the Joe Rogans of the world, or the Tucker Carlsons, or I don't know, Dan Bongino's, or Western Standard, Rebel News, which is kind of avant-garde in Canada, but they're consistent. So the growth is there, and I think that's what scares the legacy bunch and their corporate pals and the politicians who are attached at the hip to these guys. Or in the case of Canada, they actually buy off corporate media. The taxpayer not only funds a public broadcaster known as the CBC, but it also funds the other private broadcasters through subsidies. But you better make sure that whatever the message coming out of the guy who writes the checks better be there. So, but I think they totally underestimated the power of the internet, and we, our little efforts here to chat over the fence post over stuff that bugs us or what have you, from what it I think has an impact. And it may not be, millions of viewers, but there's something to be said that we're still allowed to question. We're still allowed to say, no, we don't buy into what you're telling us.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's again the other parable, isn't it, out of the Far East? If the flapping of one butterfly doesn't cause a tsunami, but maybe 100 will, and 1,000 will. So the more people start to, I guess, question, ask, is the emperor really naked, or am I just not seeing the clothes? I mean, it could be my fault. Maybe that's the start of the whole thing with the normalcy.
They're going on about how the economy is functioning well. Obviously, the purpose of national leadership is to tell you everything is okay, even if it's not. But you can't assuage the reality that is upon North Americans, or even the Western society. We have a declining economy. We have a lot of social problems which manifest themselves on the streets of major urban centers, particularly in North America. You can't gloss over the fact that they've had riots and protests in Paris and other places in Europe. You can't gloss over the fact that this war in Ukraine is dragging on and on and on, and it's not going just the way they keep telling you. And if you question it, then you're suddenly, you must be some sort of supporter of the other side, which I'm not even sure why there is any side we're taking in any case. But
no.
So they really are purposely misunderstanding or misinforming or malinforming or disinforming everybody about the power of the internet and social media. Yet, just today we're looking at the polls of the leadership, particularly in North America, and that's rock bottom. The Biden Trudeau team, right now couldn't be elected dog catcher in many places. So now you take polls for what they're worth. Their only poll that really counts is an election day, but there's clearly an impact that is being felt, and whether they want to avoid it or not, that is to say, those in power who will do whatever it takes to stay in power, because that's the thing that's really become quite evident in the last generation of politicians, you might say. in the last 20 years is to stay in power. That's the name of the game. It's not
Mhm.
the interest of the electorate or
Oh,
the
no.
well-being of the citizenry. No, 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 no. We got to be at the trough. This is beginning to, I think, in many parts of society, being questioned, and social media does that.
And I think that's very true. And uh, the fact that you can't really, well, you can, I guess, in certain areas, you could shut down even a small broadcast like ours by, you know, paying off the right people or whatever it happens to be. But there's still that groundswell of people that would, I would hope, not just for our sake, but for the sake of the population of the world, that people would start to stand up and, well, why did that disappear? Why is that not available? Why can't we watch that anymore? And maybe that's a bit voyeuristic on our part, because, you know, is this the forbidden fruit, or, you know, should we not be watching it, or should we really be actually watching it? I don't know. It's a conundrum of all kinds of
Well,
things.
some things can be explained. For example, porn sites. How do you control that? Uh, uh, it's whatever you think of pornography, it's there, and it's got to be managed by the people who are worried about their kids or whatever being subjected to it. At the same time, they say, well, we're going to turn off certain broadcasts from various parts of the world because you're not supposed to see it. So they're very efficiently saying, oh, don't watch media broadcasts from the Middle East that we don't agree with, or from Russia that we don't agree with, or China. But you self regulate on porn. Well, wait a minute. Interestingly, one makes money and one doesn't. Is that what the
Mhm.
common denominator here is? I don't know. I'm just putting that up. But censorship for the purpose of political power versus censorship for social uh, redemption, if I can use that. You know,
Well, yeah. And it goes like we've talked about before, going back to our ancient history when we worked in our profession, and you would see somebody ride up on a hog in full colors of some
you're talking about
nefarious
the border.
on
Yeah,
the border,
yeah.
or even at the airport. When I worked at an airport, I saw the guy coming in full patch, and immediately that becomes the focus. God, we got to find out. There's Billy Bob, whatever, and he's in full patch colors of this nefarious motorcycle gang. My gosh, the audacity of this man to come and show his face. And I always thought to myself, well, you want my focus here. So what's happening over here? And every now and then you get little glimmers of it, and but it still doesn't seem to be enough to follow that train of thought. Or so again, we go back with this whole thing on the internet. You want to control it, you can't. Pornography, you can try and control it, you can't. How many times have we had prohibitions where you can't drink? Well, darn well the people are going to find a place to drink. It's just, you can't
Well,
control things that.
it's interesting you bring up the drinking thing, because last week, in fact, some nitwit, and I use the term again, like you said, advisedly, in the US said that Americans should follow the Canadian example on drinking. You should only have 2 drinks a week because that's healthier for it, whatever. And I'm thinking, prohibition, what are you going to tell me now that you can't have more than 2 drinks a week? Like, where did you get this lunacy from? Needless to say, it made the news for a day or so, and then of course the absurdity of it particularly as it was exposed on the internet, not on mainstream media, was, come on, what are you talking about? If you lost your mind. And so this is part of the legacy media's attempts, I think, in many ways to stay relevant. No, we're not going to have 2 drinks a week. That's just not going to happen. If I want to drink, it's my business, not yours. Not bringing back prohibition. And so this is and if it wasn't for the internet and making absolute fun of these morons that thought this was a good idea.
Well, there's that, and it goes back to that old HBO series, The Newsroom, with Jeff Daniels, and the mainstream media was a 72-hour news cycle. We got to keep things going for 72 hours. And if it doesn't meet the 72-hour threshold, then it's really not news. And then COVID hit, and it went way past the 72 hours to the point where
that was because that was an experiment in how to essentially by these social engineers, political and otherwise, on how to regulate the behavior of society at large, and they came pretty darn close to making it a overly regulated society, with the consequences that we're well aware of now, that weren't all that great. The trouble is, I'm not sure how many folks have learned their lesson on that one yet.
Well, I guess the big lesson out of that was for me anyway, was that it wasn't contained within one border. It became
No, it was global.
and it became a global thing. And was that also part of the experiment to try to get rid of the the movement to have free movement of people,
Yes.
with another?
About halfway through all that COVID stuff, it was apparent that the buzzwords, slogans, cliches seemed to be the same globally. It was amazing how the same slogans, as I said, were used from Japan to Canada to France. Didn't matter what languages, And then once we were past that, the next slogan was building back better, or build back better. All of a sudden, everyone's building stuff back better. Like a coordinated, just for our viewers and listeners, just Google that and find out how many places it shows up as a slogan for various countries' political parties. These people aren't even original enough to come up with stuff that's relevant to their own culture or region. So you can see how the globalist approach, even in the lingo of their message, is transportable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when you talk about the shiny object versus reality, in other words, look over here, not over there, because we don't want you to look over there, because it could be something that you're not going to be happy with. This whole business with the war in Ukraine is a classic example. Now, putting aside that, the war itself, in the meantime, a complete transformation of the world's economic network and structure has taken place, where the vast majority of people don't know that it's happening. All they see is, well, there's this thing on in Ukraine, and our guy in the G7, pick one country, is doing whatever. But they have totally ignored the fact that the competitors economically in the world are not wrapped up in gender issues, race issues, in this fringe stuff. They, being the BRICS and 6 other countries, suddenly are focusing on stuff that's important to their societies in a multilateral way, which surprisingly has people who are countries that traditionally or historically or otherwise aren't even on the same page. Okay. Mm-hmm. How is it possible that India and China, which make up the original BRICS group, which is Brazil, Russia, Iran, China, and South Africa, they seem to have decided that, well, yeah, we have a problem with the border. We'll put that aside, but we'll use a common currency. Whoa, this is kind of strange. They've decided that we can't agree on everything, but we can agree on things that are good for one side and the other. So let's just focus on those things instead of the G7 version, which is whatever Washington decides is going to happen is everybody else is going to follow along with the EU, being this glob of country. Everyone has to be the same. Well, you know what? They don't care about that. Now that Iran is agreed that Saudi Arabia can join this BRICS group in January, here's another bunch that have not a whole lot in common because of cultural and religious issues, and yet they're okay, well, we'll put that aside. We'll agree to disagree on that. But you know what? We both have oil, and that makes money. And we also have, industrial power by virtue of the fact that we can buy military weapons from somebody else and not the Brits or the Americans. So we'll put that aside, even though that we've shot missiles at each other before, but I think we can get along fine on these other issues. No one is paying attention to that. That is like an earthquake. And when you put that bunch together, they make up far more population-wise than the G7 and the EU. They have a bigger GDP and purchasing power than the EU and the G7, right? In the meantime, we're in the Western world, we're focusing on gender issues and race issues and stuff that the vast majority of people have gotten over long ago. Okay, but and don't look here. Meantime, those guys over there said, well, you know what? We believe in a multi-polar world, not one that's invented by one country at the cost of the others. That is weird. And I've not read a single article in any newspaper yet. It's going to be groundbreaking here on the Bob and Tom, over the fence talk. That how is it possible that these people who are protagonists are suddenly deciding, you know what, we're done with this Western crowd. We're going to go along, and some things we'll agree on, some things we don't, and we're going to make money. And to hell with you guys. Wow.
Which, yeah, and I guess the common denominator is we're going to make money and our economy is going to do okay, and really that's well, because then our own people will be happy.
And oh, by the way, when you add those countries together, 85% of the world's oil reserves are in their hands. Energy, 85%. They will dictate the price, the availability. Okay. This, by the way, is not going to be a good omen for the G7 EU crowd, who will focus on something that is not going to heat the houses of people, keep their farm tractors running, or their trucks delivering stuff.
Yeah. Well,
and didn't you tell me that you read in the was it the Farmer's Almanac that this winter is going to be a tough one?
Yeah. Well, here, I'm assuming not just Canada. I'm sure it's probably going to be North America wide, and who knows? Maybe it's going to be global. I don't know.
Well, that's the Farmer's Almanac is far as basically North America, right?
Primarily, yeah, and they've been pretty accurate on a lot of their prognostications. So,
well, let's say they are, and it is a tough winter. What are you going to do with all those people in the northern parts of certainly Canada and the northern U.S., where we've got literally hundreds of thousands of people on the streets, homeless, in sub-zero weather?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with? How is that going to play out? Or the people who are being charged carbon taxes out the yin yang and can't pay for heating fuel or natural gas. how are they going to square that circle?
I don't think carbon tax, it's been a bone of contention with me for a long time. And if taxing something really solved the problem, would we still have an income tax?
That's an oxymoron question.
I guess it is, but simply because you got a bunch of world leaders and a Davos crowd that says, well, you have to stop eating beef, because if you stop eating beef, then there won't be 100 million cows to have bovine flatulence in the air, causing us to eat up the ozone, and you should tax the heck out of all these carbon fuels because that's bad for the environment, but it's okay for us to fly around the world in our corporate jets to attend these meetings to tell you what to do.
Now juxtaposition that with what we were talking about just earlier with this BRICS crowd. Do you think that Xi Jinping sits around with Putin discussing cow flatulence?
Well, they might, just sort of as an icebreaker. No pun intended.
But there's the joke of the thing, that's why it becomes ludicrous to spend any time giving any credence to this nonsense. That a country here in Canada, we spend more in taxes now than we do on fuel and housing and food. How do you sustain that? How is it possible?
We had that on one of the local news channels here, that with our cost of gas at, I think it was $2.10.9 per liter. Now I don't know what that works out to for our American friends in gallons, but
knock off 30%. Basically,
knock off 30%, but then that liter and multiply it by 3.54, and that'll get you a US gallon.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, $2.11, round figure arguments, 79 cents of that in the province of British Columbia goes to some form of tax.
Right.
Our roads aren't any better. Our buses, well, maybe there's a few more buses, but they happen to run on carbon fuel, although we are starting to see a few hydrogen buses and a few other electric buses and the like. But
well, we've had this discussion before. It's the revolution versus the evolution to green energy.
Mm-hmm.
You see, the revolution is going to fail, but the evolution, had they done it that way, would make sense. Electric cars in urban centers might make sense. They don't make sense. Transnational or transcontinental traffic is not going to do that. Not in our lifetime. Trains are not going to be electric in our lifetime, and so on and so forth. So for anybody who's suddenly going to hit the "don't like what we're saying" button, it's not we're against green energy. It's just how it's being approached. That's the problem here. It's you're right. If the folks who are more acerbic than I am say if high taxes was going to have an impact on wildfires and global warming, then we would have put out the fires long ago. We would have doused them with tax money. Come on, it's silly.
Well, I see we're kind of winding down our time here. So as a wrap up, is this the conundrum issue?
Well, it's a Labor Day wind up bitch and complain issue. I mean, we're all still vertical. Right? We're still breathing in it. I know we're breathing out carbon dioxide. Sorry about that for some of our fans. But no, we'll be the fall version of the BORDERPOL Journal will focus on some more border related issues. Today we did a philosophical, the Labor Day philosophical, get it off our chest.
Yeah. It makes us feel better.
Makes us feel better. And you know what would make us feel even better if people hit the like button,
Mhm.
the subscribe button. That would make us feel a whole lot better and let us know what you think. You know, give us some feedback.
It
And
would,
be
it,
nice. Don't be
it would be,
trolls. Be nice. You know, you can disagree.
wow. I think that it shows that we're doing something if we get people to disagree.
Disagreeing is okay. Being a
Yeah.
troll is not. But that's just uh, I just look at some of the really successful counterparts out there who have uh, successful shows like ours, and they go a little further on the edge than we do. But what can I say? Uh,
Yeah. It's nice to be somewhere in the middle.
we try to be nice, although occasionally we can be.
Well, I've been known to be trying. I've been told that, Bob, you're trying.
Anyway, yeah. So until we meet again next week, you have a good Labor Day weekend.
And you do.
Um, stay safe, stay well. Same to our viewers and listeners.
Yes.
Remember, you can get the full version on Rumble and on YouTube and Spotify. Oh, also on Apple Podcasts. So we
There we
have
go.
those four platforms, and see you next week,
If not before.
if not before. Take care, Bob.
You do.